Hello and welcome to the next episode of Talking Heads. So this is the podcast and video cast. Still don't know what it is. It's a video version of a podcast. So this is our series where we talk to a member of the motorcycling world to get into their world, so where they can converse with us about what it is that makes them happy and what makes their business tick. So you joined Steve Rose, our BikeSocial Publisher, and myself, Michael Mann. And in this episode number 3 of Talking Heads, we are joined by Triumph Motorcycling UK's General Manager, Devron Boulton. Dev, welcome to the show.
Easy for you to say, Michael. Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Pleasure to have you here. Welcome to our little studio.
It's very nice.
It's all right, isn't it? It's cosy and comfy, and we're not sitting on each other's knees. And the coffee's all right.
It is very good.
Cool. So we'll start as normal with these things, just by getting to know you a little bit more before we dive into the world of Triumph.
Yeah.
So, so I guess, how long have you been with Triumph?
So I started with Triumph in 2008, 1st of July 2008, which I remember because we have a uniquely odd financial year at Triumph that runs from the start of July to the end of June. So the Romans like the calendar year, but we do things slightly differently. And so it's a date that forever sort of sticks in my mind.
So you came in with a fresh big budget? And...
Something like that. I mean, I wasn't the budget holder back then. I was slightly more than the T-boy, but not much. So, but it was nice to have a fresh year to come into the business, and lots to get stuck into straight from the get-go, really.
Did you have a motorcycling background? How did you get to Triumph, and what did you do on the 1st of July 2008?
Well, lots of different questions. I suppose I'll go back to the beginning there with biking. So I suppose, like a lot of young people, I had a keen interest in anything that had wheels and preferably an engine. So, I had some friends who were farmers and things like that, and was always sort of badgering them to have a go on their bikes and quads and stuff. And in my early teens, my parents decided that they wanted to move to Spain, and their bribe to get me to sort of sign off on this as an idea was that I could have a motorbike as a teenager in Spain.
Heavens.
So I was like, brilliant, let's go. And then clearly it became apparent their idea of a motorbike and mine was probably slightly different when we got there, and had a few different rites of passage on various mopeds and things, but I think the real love affair started with my Aprilia RS50, which I was very proud of, as you would be, until I predictably crashed it, and then I was slightly less proud of it. But so yeah, bikes started then in terms of, I suppose, the emergence of the passion, and then moved back to the UK in my sort of late teens, and was determined I wanted to get a big bike license. So I did that, and I enjoyed the process of buying a bike, and I thought I wasn't too sure what I wanted to do at the time. I'd been to uni for a year and decided that I wasn't going to pursue marine engineering, so I was looking for something slightly different, and I thought, motorcycle retail, this is interesting. I never really thought about this, and I suppose a seed was lodged. And then I saw a job application or a job posting in the paper, of all things, because they used to go in the paper back then.
Old school.
And I started out in motorcycle sales, selling Triumphs, and that would have been in early 2007. So that was the start.
Where was that then?
So
a local dealership.
Yeah, so that was actually at Webb's, as it was known when it was. For any people local to the Peterborough area, it was in which was
I remember that.
Well positioned on the way out, the sort of coast run out to Hunstanton. So it was quite a busy destination. People would come down at the weekends just to hang out, and it was a Yamaha dealership at the time, and it had taken on Triumph very recently. So I joined that business right at the start of its Triumph journey, and then started to form relationships with some of the team at Hinckley, as you do, and one thing led to another, and they ended up offering me a role in the sales team at Hinckley. So that was how I jumped from one to the other, and that was in this sort of internal sort of sales role, so working with the dealer network, making sure that they had the bikes that they needed to hit their target, and that they were buying enough from us, because at the time we had to sell into the dealers a little bit more than we do these days.
Where did your career go from there?
all over the place. So it was a bit of a winding road.
But you were based at Hinckley.
Yeah, back at that point in time, I was commuting to Hinckley. I still commute to Hinckley, but at the time I was commuting to Hinckley on a company bike. So that was one of the things that attracted me to the role amongst many things. So yeah, I know what it's like to get wet on a motorbike when you're doing it every day and ride through the winter and all of that good stuff. And I'm probably unashamedly a little bit more of a fair weather rider these days, but I've certainly did my time sort of clogging up and down the A14, wiping away the spray and hanging up the sort of the jacket at the end of the day and just watching all the water sort of drip out of it. So
yeah, I think mine's in there today.
Well, so there we go. So yeah, I had a small. Well, I say small stint, a relatively small stint within the internal sort of sales function, so within the Triumph UK selling subsidiary. And then I took a regional role, or I was lucky enough to get promoted into a regional sales role, looking after the south of the UK. There was about 25 dealers in my region at the time, and that included the exotic Jersey that I got to visit every now and again. So that was my furthest flung dealer, down as far south as Plymouth and London. So yeah, cut my teeth doing that, working with our dealers who were fantastic and welcoming of quite a young green person into their world. I think the fact that I'd done a stint in a dealership sort of gave me a little bit of credibility, and really it went from there. So that was all about making sure those dealers did all the things that we wanted and hit their sales targets and looked after customers and stuff like that, which they did, obviously. And then from there on, I moved into dealer development, which was a national role. And that was really quite an exciting role at quite an exciting time, because in 2015, we'd launched our new brand identity, which was what became known as Triumph World Black. So that was when the logo went from the sort of blue and grey that it had been launched with and became the sort of white on black, which was much more modern and I think much more representative of the brand that we wanted to be. But we had a network of sort of 50 dealers who were all grey and blue, and so obviously they were very excited when I came around to see them and painted this fantastic opportunity for them to invest in the new Triumph World identity. So yeah, that was my job for best part of 5 years, upgrading dealer facilities and showrooms and doing all the things that we needed to do to create a fantastic home for the brand to live in and for customers to interact with it and ultimately hopefully choose to buy Triumphs from. So that was that bit. And then I took a step back into sales briefly. So Bruno Tagliaferri, who many will know as a legend of the modern Triumph era, had been our national sales manager for many years. He recruited me into the business and he retired. And I was lucky enough to step into his role for what proved to be a fairly short stint, because our then general manager of the time left the business and I was sort of caretaking the role for a few months while they found somebody better to do it, and they failed to do that, and so they gave me a crack.
Oh wow!
And here we are 5 years later. So it's been really good. It's been really exciting. I've got to do many wonderful things within each of the different roles that I've played within the business, and now I sort of get to sort of steer the ship in the UK selling subsidiary, if you like, and we've got a great bunch of dealers that do a fantastic job, and they're the flock, and we look after them, and hopefully we look after our customers too.
Brilliant.
That's been a really interesting time for Triumph, hasn't it? I think you talk about that time from sort of 2008, and it felt to me as a kind of spectator and somebody working in the press, it felt like Triumph spent the first decade of Hinckley Triumph sort of putting out feelers, trying things, seeing what worked, trying to work out what the market was that they were in and where the market was going. But by that time, by that kind of late noughties, you got it. It felt like you knew what the market was, you knew what your strengths were. You could sort of see even then the way you were going. And the next 7 or 8 years, you consolidated that. You could see that, the kind of the adventure bike thing and the naked stuff, and moving further in that direction and just, less so in those directions. And I think now you see it even more. I think it's much more clear to to the customer what Triumph is.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I suppose as a young business, you're learning the market, you're learning, the customers and what they want and what they want you to be. And I think Triumph has always, ultimately, we want to be what our customers want us to be. So we're quite a customer-led business, but by the same time, we want to respect who we stand for and what we think makes our motorbikes fantastic, bikes to ride and enjoy. And I think, like you say, the early years, there was a degree of growing up and learning and seeing what worked and seeing what was well received and perhaps wasn't so well received, and the whys and the wherefores, and sort of honing, the technique and the approach to the market, really. And I think, like you say, post the fire, where the business really sort of started to move past the modular era into individual, model lines with their own chassis and engine configuration that were sort of less constrained by those modular constraints. It could be more about what we really wanted that particular bike to be. And I think the sort of 2004 onwards, the 1050 triple, which I think is an engine that a lot of people would still look back to and say was a real peach of an engine. And then it sat nicely in the Sprint ST and the Tiger Sport and the Speed Triple. So those three bikes off that engine platform that all had their own unique character, but all went really well. And then we started to build into the sort of middleweight area, with, like you say, the Daytona 675, that was actually my first Triumph. So,
well, I was going to ask. You were talking about your first ever, your first bike doing your sales journeys.
Yeah.
Do you ride into Plymouth on a Daytona 675?
No, I wasn't quite that. I rode around the UK on a Daytona 675, which is a different story. But I was made of slightly harder stuff then. But no, so when I started at Webb's, I was very proud of myself because I turned up to my interview on my motorbike, in my leathers, with a shirt and a tie on under my leathers. So I was trying to sort of be this hybrid of all these things that you think somebody would want to see of you on an interview. I think one of the things that they said is, it's great when you join, you can ride some of the demos and things and see what you like. So I was very keen to ride a Daytona, and I remember I rode it home and I didn't really quite know what I thought of it, because all I'd known up to that point was inline fours, with a big sort of screaming top end, and I didn't really get the power delivery, really. So the first time I rode it home, I thought, well, that was a little bit different to what I'm used to. And then the second time when I rode it back to work, I was like, oh no, this is the future. This is amazing. And so, the ZX6 was very quickly chopped in, and I bought myself a Daytona, a nice red one with a Union Jack fairing, and I thought I was very cool. I didn't commute to Hinckley on it though. I did opt for something slightly more sensible once I joined the team at Hinckley. A lot of Tiger Sport 1050s, I think I went through in those early years.
What a bike though.
Yeah, it was brilliant. It was, fast, comfy, decent weather protection, obviously some luggage. And my wife even enjoyed coming out on the back every now and again as well. So that was a bonus.
Yeah, and it's interesting that concept has come around again, hasn't it? It was at the time you had the Tiger Sport. It was pretty much the only bike like that, wasn't it? The kind of adventure sports tourer hybrid, for want of a better cliche. But now I think with the 660 and the 800 Tiger Sport, it kind of seems there is a market for those bikes, and you can see by the reviews and the popularity of them.
Yeah, I mean, my early reflections, I suppose, was I thought if you wanted to enjoy speed, you needed to be a sports bike rider with a sports bike, because anything else was going to be compromised and, not fast and not fun and all the rest. But I think, that quickly changed and proved to be quite flawed, really. And, go out for a ride with groups of mates and you're riding a sports bike thinking you're doing really well, and then they're just on your tail, riding something comfy, and you're like, oh, that's a bit depressing, isn't it? I've got to try a bit harder here. But, that's the modern bikes have got so much more capable, haven't they, that actually, middleweight adventure bikes these days, you can do anything on them, really. And
200 brake horsepower, some of them.
Yeah, exactly. So you're not compromised in the way that you probably think you might be. It's more of a heart and head thing, I think, at the end of the day, isn't it? Unless you're doing track days.
I think bikes have evolved, haven't they? The one extreme sports bikes used to be, certainly for my age now, too extreme to use every day. But at the same time, at that time, adventure bikes, which were often big single cylinder bikes, weren't capable enough, at the other end of the scale. And now it's just sort of coalesced, hasn't it? The market we've now got these things as technology has moved on, as tyres have got better, as fuel injections got better. You can now have a 100 horsepower, comfortable, upright, adventure style bike that could also go like stink and do everything you want it to.
Yeah, and I think also the roads have evolved, haven't they? And what you can do and how you can enjoy them. And actually, I think once you can get your head around being up in the breeze a little bit more, which some people enjoy, some people are less keen on, then you start to enjoy the advantages of being able to see and the comfort and all the rest of it. And it's quite a compelling package, isn't it? So you can see why they've become so popular.
Well, when you first started, Dev, at Triumph, you were obviously close to the customers, being in the dealer network. You knew the customer. But as your time has evolved, has the customer base evolved, or is it just the same people, but they're now 16, nearly 17 years older?
I think it's a bit of both. I think if we're brutally honest, I think there's a core of the motorcycle market that was probably, I don't know, 35 when I started, in my career in motorcycles, that's 55 now, and those people I think are probably still the spine of the motorcycle market, certainly here in the UK anyway. Of course, new people are joining the market, and we're constantly trying to recruit new interest into two wheels. But I think the difference in the generational piece is a lot of that generation of riders, if you like, were sort of first time riders, when they were 16, 17, 18, whatever, when biking was a mode of transport. Perhaps they couldn't afford a car or they didn't need a car, so they had a clearer route into motorcycling, and I therefore think many of them carried that interest forward. Whereas I think these days it's a little bit harder sometimes to convince younger people to jump onto two wheels, at 16, 17, 18, and then come into a full license. So I'm sitting on the fence there. It's a bit of both, but I think there is still a big core of that group that's sort of grown up with bikes.
You can imagine that, if you're in your early 20s now, the kind of conversations you've got to have to justify getting a motorbike, particularly if you're in a family where motorcycling has skipped a generation or two. If you're, if the rest of your family has got no contact with motorcycles, at the point you go home and say, "Hey, Mum, I'm going to ride a bike," there must be an awful lot of very difficult conversations to have, and you need to be pretty determined, not just to get past that, but then to go through all the licensing process and everything else. It's a big deal.
I think you're right, and I think there's that industry collective responsibility, I think, to try and do that outreach piece and educate people on what's fantastic about two wheels and help them through that process, because what's on the other side of it is amazing. I think I've spent, like many people in my position, you're constantly looking at how you bring in a younger customer into the brand, because that's going to give you longevity, and obviously ultimately some of these people are going to start dropping out the top end, so you do need to be bringing new customers in. But I think one of the things that I have observed actually is I think a lot of people these days come into motorcycling around the age of 40. If they don't do the first time piece,
and then come back in 40.
Exactly, because I think maybe life's progressed to a point where they've now got a bit more time, a bit more disposable income. They're looking for leisure, because it is largely leisure in the UK particularly. And I think that's when we tend to see we get them. There is, of course, there are younger riders that are riding smaller capacity bikes, but I still think they're quite a small percentage of the overall. But it's not all lost because of that, because I do think around that kind of late 30s, early 40s is another good opportunity to capture people.
I guess that's quite from a range and a product planning point of view, because again, we as spectators can sit there and go, well, why don't Triumph make a 125, or why don't Triumph make scooters, or or even you fairly recently into the 400 market. But actually, I guess to say if what you're seeing is that a lot of your customers are coming in at 40, that's less important, isn't it? Because by the time you see them, they've passed the test.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, it's great to get people early, and I think people build brand loyalty early. So if the sooner you can get hold of them, the better, because hopefully you keep them for the long term. but the economics of the small capacity, the real small capacity stuff is difficult, and you just have to build in huge volume to make money there. And, you know, exchange rate fluctuations and things like that can really make that quite a marginal business.
Yeah, and there's a lot of very established players already.
Exactly, doing a great job. So it's been fantastic to go down the capacity sort of ladder, and for sure, you know, having the 400s in the range has given us access to a far, you know, bigger pool of customers than would have been previously the case. So that's really positive. But equally, coming back to your point, you know, I do see, for example, with Trident, that, you know, we get a lot of customers that sort of come into motorcycling and then come into Triumph at that kind of level. I mean, we have our Ticket to Ride scheme that we launched just about a year ago now, and that's really aimed at attracting people who are within 12 months of passing their test, so have passed their test within 12 months and come into the brand, and they get a contribution. And actually, I see a lot of that with the Tridents. So we know we are getting people that have only had their license for less than 12 months. And, you know, actually, when you look at their pass certificates, a lot of them are in that age bracket that I described. So I'm encouraged by that.
That's very good news. And Trident's A2-able, isn't it? Is it a kit that restricts it?
Yeah.
There's not a standalone machine, is there?
Correct.
And do you see many of that? Is it a popular option?
Not as much as you would imagine. Statistically, I think it's about 12-13% of pass tests are sort of A2 at the moment. So it is, in the UK, it's still really quite a small market, and it's also not an easy thing to track because of the modification process. When you sell dedicated A2 bikes, it's a little bit easier to understand. And we do make a range of A2 bikes now that we sell more predominantly into European markets where the A2 market is bigger. But here in the UK, it seems to be a really quite a niche part of the market.
So the pool of customers you're talking about with the Trident 660, are they the sort of the older crowd who have just passed for the first time?
Yeah, so they tend to be direct access, you know, and straight in at the full power, really. And I'd say that's the vast majority that I see. And it's one of the great things about the programme is because it gives us that opportunity to understand that. Whereas before I might have been guessing, now I can actually be a bit more objective about it and go, oh no, you know, they really are.
You've got data to back it up.
That's interesting.
Exactly.
I remember last year seeing some really good figures for the 400s that you launched last year.
Yeah.
And are they? Again, we talk about are the customer for those? Are they kind of younger riders on the way up, or are they older riders downsizing, or is it a bit of both?
I think it's a bit of both. I think the answer probably varies by market a little bit. I think in the UK, we're seeing quite a lot of riders who are older as well as younger ones. And in particular, some riders who having the opportunity to get a smaller, lighter bike is prolonging their enjoyment of motorcycling. So potentially they might be, you know, coming down from a larger capacity Bonneville, and they want something that's a bit more manageable. So it really is quite a broad spread. You've got also, I think, your more core market where quite a few people like it as a second bike as well, because it's something that's a little bit easier to just nip out on, and you know, not quite so full on as getting the big Tiger 1200 out the garage or whatever it might be. So there's a definite second bike fraternity
convenience.
And then of course there's some newer riders as well, and I think that's the area we're trying to cultivate more, because ultimately, you know, we're hopeful that it's another way, you know, for newer, younger riders to come and get into the brand.
Yeah, because I guess the point for them is, well, for both of those customers actually, is that it's a good bike, it's credible, and it's affordable.
Yeah,
and I is it right? I might have dreamt these numbers, but I'm sure I read somewhere these numbers that there's about 3,000 of them sold last year in the UK, and that they made up a significant portion of Triumph's worldwide sales last year, just those two models.
Yeah, I mean they were phenomenally successful for us here in the UK. It was an interesting one for us to try and gauge coming into the market, because the kind of market broadly split into two, really. You've got Enfield and the rest, if you like, the sort of premium players that are operating in that space, be that BMW, Honda, KTM, and if you looked at the sort of comparable models that they were selling in terms of capacity and price point, they were all sort of sat at 300-400-ish a year. And then you've got Enfield selling, several thousand. And really, when we were developing the bikes, we were developing them to be more capable, premium, have, the refinements, if you like, that the other sort of premium players in the segment did. So we were thinking we were going to be more towards that end of the spectrum initially in terms of volumes, really. However, we then had a rethink, at launch, and the reaction and the reception to the bike was incredibly positive, and we got the price positioning confirmed, and that was, really positive as well. So yeah, I remember talking to the team about it, and we thought, actually, maybe we've undercooked this a bit. I think we could possibly do a few more. And, we decided to have a crack at it. So we upped the volumes significantly, really, in terms of our expectation. And then we ended up beating our significant increase significantly as well. So it sort of, it built from there. And I think, by the end of calendar year 24, we were just shy of 3,000.
That's just UK, right?
Just in the UK from a standing start.
Was that speed and 50-50 mix?
Yeah, more or less. About 55% speed 400, so slightly more on that basis. And in terms of the global result, a significant number of 400s in the mix. But in what was otherwise a phenomenal year for the brand anyway. It was the year that we eclipsed 100,000 retails for the first time, which is a massive milestone for the brand. So that's, globally, and obviously the 400s played a part in that.
Well, how does that move forward? How do you then think, you've obviously got a lot of things cooking up in Hinckley and beyond that you can't talk about, but the 400 project is a long time happening, and then you don't know its popularity or its significance until the end of calendar year 24. Does that then affect the plans that you are now the things you are planning for the next 4 or 5 years?
I think at the end of the day, with the product planning side of the business, you're always working quite a long way out in front. By the time those successes come along, you've already made your decisions well into the future, and hopefully you've made some good ones. I mean, it's the lifeblood of the business really is that product plan that feeds the beast and keeps everybody interested and excited, and I think the team do a phenomenal job in terms of anticipating where the market is going and where we see space in the market, and that's where we tend to. We're quite measured, I think, in terms of what we develop and why, and we want to see that there is a market opportunity there that is worth the effort to go and develop a model for, and I think that's part of why we succeed commercially, or have succeeded commercially in the way that we do, because we don't tend to get too sidetracked with vanity projects. We're building the bikes that we think people want.
You were describing it earlier, kind of the culture in Triumph. I think measured is a really good word, because I always think of Triumph as being a very thoughtful, kind of considered company. I think you like you say, you don't have those flights of fancy. We see it every now and then from other manufacturers, and I won't pick on anybody in particular, but Triumph hasn't built something that looks like a Batmobile, or something that's got 3 wheels or 5 wheels or whatever it's coming. Everything that comes from Triumph is something that you think, I get that. I get why they've done that. Yeah. And it feels like a very considered, thoughtful company.
Unlike a lot of other brands that make motorcycles, we only make motorcycles. So therefore we will be as successful as our motorcycle portfolio. We haven't got other things to go, well, don't worry, it's a good year for lawnmowers or whatever else it might be, outboards. We make bikes, and if we make good ones and we do the sales and marketing job well, then we'll succeed. And if we don't, we won't. It's as simple as that. So, we're very mindful of that, I think, and want to make the best decisions that we can to give ourselves the best chance of success. And that's why we'll look at where we think the market is evolving and where we think we fit as well, which is another thing that I think came out of that sort of that clarity post 2010 and beyond, where I think actually for the business it was really about making sure that we're being authentically Triumph with what we do. I'm sure, all brands over the years will produce something that's, risks being a bit of a Me Too bike rather than their own thing. And, I think those are rarely the bikes that prove to be your biggest hits. So I think what we've learned as we've grown up as a brand is who we are and where we're credible and where we can operate credibly, so that when we come into a space, people go, yeah, that makes sense. And then we back it up, generally speaking, with a pretty good bike as well. So, you put those two things together, and more often than not, you get the results. Sometimes you don't, but that's the way of the world, isn't it?
For a company that operates in so many different markets globally, and again, there's several bits of this in my head I'm jumping about, but we as kind of British audience kind of think, well, Triumph's a British company, surely they're making bikes that we must be their most important market. But I'm sure in terms of numbers, we're not the most important market. But at the same time, when you're in product planning, are you making a bike that you think our biggest global market is X, so we need to build a bike for that, or do you start off by saying, this is what we stand for, this is what Triumph's values are, and so let's build a bike that meets those values, or is it a bit of both?
I think inevitably it's probably a hybrid of the two things. When you've got a global marketplace, some bikes will sit better in a market than another market, but I think actually for us the range sells well internationally. There'll be nuances to, they do a bit more on adventure or they do a bit more on classic, but actually I think the portfolio of bikes that we have, serves the international market well. But clearly, within that market, there'll be bits of it that are bigger. And you think, well, that's a really important place for us to be. We need to have a really strong middleweight adventure bike, because actually that's a big part of the global market. And if we get that right, then we'll do well. But then I think you add in your own special ingredients, if you like, in terms of coming at it in a way that's uniquely Triumph. And that's absolutely what we do. I think it's no secret that we exclusively focus on triples and twins, parallel twins, and that's what we do. So that's a very conscious choice. Coming back to that comment about the sort of more experimental era, some of the early bikes we had inline fours, etc. We tried different configurations, and what we concluded and what we learned was actually, triples and parallel twins are our authentic place. So often that will be the point of difference in a segment. Others have obviously, also realised the benefits of triple. But, I think we would claim it.
Yeah, that's fair
first.
Yeah.
Just coming back to that the 400s, there's clearly an enormous market there, and you found that out with sales over the last year or more, 18 months. Somebody gets to, I don't know, March, April, May of last year, of 2024, when you're thinking, all right, well, sales have gone very well here. Do you just ring up the factory where they're being manufactured and go, do more of those ones, not those ones? How does that process work? Because, in my mind, it's simple. You just press a button and something, Mr. Blaw's sitting there going, what's P400s, please?
Yeah, like any business, I guess we'll maintain a rolling forecast, a rolling horizon of what we think, we're going to be doing from a numbers point of view, and therefore what we're going to need to build. One of Triumph's standout attributes, I would say, and one of our critical factors in our success is our agility as an organisation. So we do react and can respond to changes in demand, I think, faster than some businesses. I wouldn't necessarily say all, but certainly faster than some. So it's a combination of seeing a trend early, deciding that you want to act on it, and then ultimately putting it into the forecast so you can get it in the production plan and get those bikes, into the market. Constantly looking at the numbers and refining the forecast, and then having a manufacturing base that's very agile and will always try and accommodate, exceptional requests if it thinks there's a commercial justification to do it. And, we're very fortunate in that sense.
I remember being the trip to the factory. I haven't been to the factory for quite a long time, but when I went, I remember being really surprised by watching the line go past, how it wasn't just all the same bike going down the line. That, as it went past you, there were at least 3 or 4 of the range being built at the same time.
I think everybody would imagine, wouldn't they, that you'd do 50 of something and then another 50 of something. So when you come along and you see different bikes in what appears to be quite a random sequence, it's quite mind blowing. I think, wow,
they're not built to order, are they? So if you've got your dealer manager at Webbs of Peterborough saying, I need 10 more Speed 400s.
Yeah,
you don't just go press that button.
No,
do you?
No. A big element of it comes back to good planning, which is why we spend as much time as we do on that side of the job, because that's obviously what's driving that forward build plan. And then hopefully, if you're doing a good job at that bit, you're just shaping it thereafter to say it's a bit more of that and a bit less of that, rather than going, oh crikey, we need a lot more of that and a lot less of that, because that's when you'd sort of find the limits.
So when we're in a world like we are now, where we're talking, probably occasionally worrying, thinking about the end of internal combustion engines, and there's legislation that I know we don't know exactly when yet, but there's legislation talked about 2030, maybe 2035, about the end of being able to buy new internal combustion engines. Steve Sargent at the MCIA conference recently gave a really interesting presentation about your electric project, the TE1. Which is a fantastic looking bike, the best looking electric bike I've seen.
Award winning.
He quite openly said, the challenge at the moment is we can make an electric bike that performs like a speed triple, but we can't make an electric bike that performs like a speed triple that has the range of a speed triple or will cost the same as a speed triple. Yeah. There are these 3 factors in play, really: price, range and performance, and we can't make that equal. So bearing in mind there's a many years of product planning between a bike being signed off and it appearing in showrooms. He was effectively saying we can't justify that amount of time, that amount of effort, that product planning and resource, because there isn't a market for it at the moment. What needs to change with that? Or do you think the answer is going to be synthetic fuels? Is that just a flight of fantasy, do you think?
I think the TE1 project was a fantastic learning opportunity for the business, and will I'm sure stand us in good stead, whatever comes. And I think, for those lucky enough to ride the bike, they were all hugely complimentary about how it was to ride. It was exciting, fast, all the things that we would probably want, in effect, a speed triple type product to be. But to your point, that triangulation of price, range and performance is something that's got to be right for the consumer. And today clearly that would be challenging, and some brands are a bit further on their journey in that space and are probably seeing that. So I think for us it's about making sure that we're ready when ultimately that final sort of trajectory is understood, and also in the meantime trying to do what we can to champion the benefits of synthetic fuels and things like that as a way to prolong the internal combustion engine. I mean, the good thing I suppose is we're still, and this is a very UK centric view, but we're not at a point yet of understanding the final timeline. And I think generally the dialogue with government had been going quite well in that regard. We live in hope that we can ultimately, get a similarly positive outcome. And in the meantime, just making sure that you're ready to adapt and react to where the market is going or where the market is being driven. And coming back to that point about agility, that's where Triumph is I think well served to sort of pivot wherever we need to go.
I don't envy you, but at the same time I'm fascinated to see what comes out at the end of it.
I mean, I think inevitably certain bits of the motorcycle market are better suited to electrification. So be that whether that's your kind of final mile type commuter type bike or lower powered, less performance orientated bikes. I don't think it would be a sea change in any event. I think it will lead with the things that make more sense. I think you're already seeing that, aren't you, with electric trials and things like that, like the Osset bikes that we manufacture. They're already the right solution today in that bit of the market. So it's just how it evolves forwards.
Is that why you bought Osset? Because of the technology that could potentially be seen in larger, I say capacity, but larger framed bikes going forwards?
I can't talk for the business in terms of why we bought Osset, unfortunately, but I think it's been a great opportunity to take a step into an electrified motorcycle, and obviously there's lots of learnings that have come with that, and it means we've got an offer in that space, however niche it may be. So clearly there's some advantages there, but whether that was the motivator or not, that's not one I can answer, I'm afraid.
And it's interesting. And talking of kind of new directions you're going, we before we turned the cameras on, we were talking about the motocross project, and that's again, a lot of us didn't see that coming, and that must have been, that must have been fascinating for a company that's had no involvement with it, certainly since the 60s or 70s, to then go. What was the thinking behind the MX project?
Firstly, I'd say I was probably, just as shocked as anybody when we decided we were doing that, because clearly there are, decisions that are taken at, a HQ level about the future of, the business that then filter out to the markets at the right time. And usually something comes along and you think, that makes sense, completely logical. It's just a natural evolution of what we do. And occasionally, and it's one of the great things about working at Drive, you get quite a radical sort of, announcement that wasn't necessarily something you're expecting. You're like, wow, that's super exciting. And I think for us, I suppose, coming back to that growth mindset of how do we continue to grow the business, and, you're gradually eating the cake that is the road bike market, sort of getting to the share that you expect in each of those areas. And then I guess you're left thinking, well, how do we keep growing and evolving the business? And also coming back to some of our earlier conversations about different customer types, how do we talk to a different customer and appeal to a different customer? And going into the off-road space gives us that opportunity. It gives us the opportunity to grow, because it's an area that we're not in today. So anything that we achieve there is positive, and it gives us an opportunity to bring new customers into the brand that are almost certainly people that we haven't sold to before in the majority of instances. But the fascinating thing about it for me is kind of coming back to the Triumph and some of the things that sort of make us tick as a business. We don't do anything by halves. So that's not, so if we're doing it, we're doing it. And, and to be fair, just the sheer amount of effort and determination that's gone into that project to get it off the ground is just phenomenal. And it's one of the things I love about the business, that we never stop surprising people. And I think we're already starting to see the fruits of our labour, second season now in terms of the World Series. And we've picked up some of our first race wins in Supercross and MXGP. So that's phenomenal. And we're also seeing the domestic seasons get underway now. And we've got our own UK team, Dirt Store Triumph, who are racing in the British MX2 class this year. So we're now starting to really kind of do the outreach piece and see some results come through, which is super exciting.
It's remarkable how much Triumph are involved with in terms of the breadth of all of motorcycling. And I guess as general manager, you've got to be a bit of an expert at all of those stages, haven't you? Whether it's motocross, whether it's 400cc small capacity bikes, whether it's the triples, the 1200s, even Moto2. We've not talked about racing and a British super sport team, world super sport team. There's the off-road experiences, Osset we've mentioned.
Yeah, there's a lot to it. I think 2024 was really quite a mind-blowing year in that sense. Suddenly the pitch that you're playing on's just doubled in size, and it's like, wow, there's a lot more pieces in play simultaneously. So it has been a hugely kind of busy period, and lots of learning, just understanding the different seasonalities of some of these other areas of the market and what drives them, and what customers want. It's been quite a big 12 months, I think, and coming off the back of that now, it's starting to feel a little bit more normal. But it's we're always constantly learning, and it does keep it exciting. I think you've got to enjoy variety at Triumph. I think, unfortunately, I do. So
good job. You've been there 16 years, haven't you? But what?
17.
17,
Yes. Well, nearly 17. 17
in July.
on the 30th of June, to be precise.
Yeah, that's 3 years. So you've obviously seen a great deal of change over the last 17 years. But what's the next 17 years look like?
Oh,
Is there anything you can tell us? Give us some insights.
Coming after me with the big questions now. I can't talk about specifics of future product development. Obviously, what I would say is, we plan to be here for the next 17 years. So you can take it as read that, we'll continue to develop and evolve the range to meet the needs of the market. It is changing. It is evolving. Some of that's potentially legislative, as we've talked about. Some of it's potentially customer led. We'll see how it evolves. I think I look at the UK market and I still think that apart from motorcycles to play, and I think leisure for a lot of people is still going to be the driving force behind the purchase. But obviously there is more to it than that. It is a viable transport solution as well. It can be part of a green agenda in terms of even today's, motorcycles, are far less polluting than the equivalent, four-wheeled vehicle. So there's lots of different dynamics in play. But I think, as I touched on earlier, we've just got to keep on making sure that we're making motorcycling, should I say, exciting and appealing and more attractive to a wider audience of people, really. And I think there's all sorts of things that are going on that are helping with that. I mean, you'll have seen technology coming into bikes now, making them safer as well, which, I think is all part of, making people want to come and do it. And that's going to be an interesting thing as that evolves forwards. But my crystal ball isn't perfect. So, So, what will the market look like in 17 years? For sure, it will be a bit different, but I think we will have evolved to fit it.
What about the next Dev Boulton? What about the next general manager of Triumph? What would you say to them, or what advice would you give them, or how could they get to where you are? Would there be any teenagers on RS50s in Spain who have just moved from England to?
For me, I think passion for what you do is important. I think particularly in our market, I think it's a passion subject for people. Absolutely. We do it because we want to, not because we have to. We do it because it's exciting, and so I think you've got to be excited by it. I think otherwise, it's just not going to be for you. If you're excited by it, then you'll be motivated to do the hard work at the end of the day and go and learn your craft. And I think you've got to kind of try and understand that the market that you're in, spend time in it, do different things, understand what makes customers tick, understand the commercial aspects of business at the end of the day, because it is a business ultimately. And, the dealer network in terms of that supply chain, it all needs to work. So understanding how it works, and what it takes to succeed in that space, I think is important. And it's like all things really. Perseverance. I know it's not a glamorous thing, but you've just got to stick at it and keep doing it, keep broadening the experience and try and do different things. And if you can acquire enough experience, then eventually you potentially get into a more general role like mine where where it all comes together really.
Does Triumph feel like a different kind of company? We were saying earlier, weren't we, how it's actually really unusual. It's a company. It's got one shareholder, from right. It's it's been owned by John Blow and Nick runs it now. Right?
That's great.
Since the
over 40 years,
mid-80s. And it's run very differently to pretty much any other, certainly big automotive company, but most of the companies of that size. Does it feel like a family company? Does it feel like is there an atmosphere in there that's different to other places you worked?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, in fairness, most of my career has been with Triumph, although I had a few years with some other businesses previously, but not what I would consider big businesses. But I think, Triumph is quite a unique business in terms of that structure, and it's quite a flat structure, which means that actually, you can the communication between the top of the business and the wider business, you know, is really quick. It's really clear. You know, you're encouraged to, you know, think. You're allowed an opinion, and you're probably known in a business like Triumph, whatever you do. So therefore, yeah, it does feel like a business where if you really sort of knuckle down and do your best and do well, that there's an opportunity to progress within the business. And I think in other businesses, you know, you can maybe get slightly more faceless organisations, you can get a bit lost in them. I don't think that happens at Triumph. Everybody makes a contribution at Triumph.
So your senior management team, actually, they've been there for a long, long time, haven't they?
Yeah.
So it must feel like a family, or you must know each other well, so you know how it all works. And
yeah, I think it's it's a testament to the type of company that it is, that the people that are there have, you know, largely been there for a long time, and you know, so it does bring a lot of those advantages to it, that you know each other, and you know how each other work and what you want to achieve ultimately. And I think it's a great credit to the company, because, you know, I think it just reinforces the point that everybody understands that it's a special business that they want to be a part of. So they stay.
So other than the 400s, what else is selling well this year or last year?
Well, I mean, when we look across the UK, there's always, well, it feels like there's always quite a lot going on. Last year, I think we launched new Tiger 900, and Tiger 900 is by family our biggest selling plus 500cc, you know, part of the range. So somewhere around 1,800 of those across the different sort of platforms a year. So that's been a significant seller for us. Street Triple is another sort of big model platform for us that continues to do well. And, you know, the middleweight triples also. So, you know, Trident and Tiger Sport. This year, looking into 25, we've launched the new Tiger Sport 800, and that seems to have landed really well. So right at the beginning of the conversation, we were talking about my Tiger Sport 1050. Well, you know, there's certainly a generation of Tiger Sport customers who probably missed that bike and are excited that we've got something a little bit more powerful than the 660 to tempt them with now. So that's going well. We've revamped some of the classics this year. So we've got a new Speed Twin 1200 range, including the RS and the 900 as well. Those are finding their feet, and I think benefiting from a bit of sunshine. Now it's warmed up a bit. And obviously the latest bike to hit the showrooms is the new Speed Triple 1200 RS. And that I'm very excited for, because I think it's into its second generation now of kind of the newly imagined Speed Triple, if you like. And I think for me, it really I think it delivers all of the sort of promise of the new in terms of the performance and, you know, moving it a bit further around that part of the dial, if you like, but somehow bringing some of the old bits of the Speed Triple that everybody loves around that, you know, super to ride on the road and, you know, just a bike that you can do everything on. So I'm very excited for that. I think it's going to be really, really good.
What do you ride? Do you get to choose from the press fleet, or have you got your...
Yeah, so I'm in between bikes at the moment myself, and it's always difficult to choose because I do get to ride, kind of whatever I sort of fancy, really. I tend to gravitate between Street Triple 765 if I just want to go and have some fun. I suppose that's a slightly more grown-up Daytona in my head. And then if I'm doing big trips, I actually jump on the Tiger 12 a lot. I know that you know, many people enjoy the Tiger 9, and I do as well. But actually, you know, I think when you're carrying luggage or doing big mileage, I like the Tiger 12. So I'll tend to find myself on one of the two of those more often than not.
Have you done the riding experience over in Wales?
I have, yeah.
Is it good fun?
It's brilliant, yeah. In fact, I've done it a couple of times. The first time I did it, I was riding the Tiger 9, and that was really good. And I remember at the time thinking, I'm not sure I'd fancy this on the Tiger 12. And then the second time I did it on the Tiger 12, predominantly because I was with a group of people who didn't want to do it on the Tiger 12. So I thought, okay, well, let's give it a whirl. And to be fair, you know, the latest generation Tiger 12, amazing. For a bike of that size and weight, to be riding it in the way that we were riding it. And I wouldn't class myself as a particularly experienced or talented off-road rider. So if I was managing to live with it, I'd say it's a good bike. And it was really, really good fun. Really, really good fun.
Do you think those riding experiences are something that you might expand? I know you've got the off-road experience, haven't you? I don't.
It's something that we would always want to do more of if we can. Obviously, the TAE over in South Wales is phenomenal, and so our priority is making sure that works, because I think we've kind of probably set a new standard with that one, really, in terms of the quality of the facilities, the bikes, the instruction. So you want to make sure that's getting the throughput. But with the off-road bikes, and it quickly became apparent that we were going to have a rethink about how can we give people access to these, because you can't just go and book a demo at your local dealer in the way that you would be able to conventionally. So we did a tour last season around a number of MX tracks, and that was really popular. So we're doing another tour this season, which will be imminently kicking off. I think around 6 different track venues sort of dotted around the UK. And there'll be the chance to ride the 450 on that as well. And then I think the build into that will be, because that's us and taking bikes around, is actually how do we then start to open up some actual experience centres. So if we look at Ossett, for example, we do have some work with some experience centres where you can just go and ride those. And I think it's a natural evolution to the off-road product that you'll be able to do that as well. But these things just take time to build in. There's only so much you can do in any given 12 months.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. One of the things that also kind of interests me, we talked a lot about Triumph's future and what Triumph are planning and how they'll manage that. But there are some things about the future that you can't control, I guess. And one of the things that we're all kind of curious about at the moment, we're all seeing happening is the Chinese manufacturers, transitioning from making predominantly small bikes into ever more kind of technically heavy, middleweight and probably heavier adventure bikes in particular, as the sports bikes. How do you see that? Is that a threat? Is it a challenge? Is it an opportunity?
Coming back to the start of your point there, I think we tend to focus on the things that we can control as much as we can, but you can't be blind to what's going on around you in the market. I think there's probably a couple of different ways you can look at what's going on with some of the Chinese brands. And I think, bringing more accessible bikes into the market at lower price points, potentially that's good for the market, in the sense that if it's growing the market base and bringing more people in at a more accessible price point, and bringing people into the market at that level, then that can be a good thing. Because ultimately they were probably not going to come in on a Triumph necessarily, unless it was a 400. But once they're a motorcyclist, hopefully then they become a more discerning motorcyclist. And it's about how do you maintain your edge and your unique character and your brand appeal at the end of the day. And I think some of that is brand, and making sure that you are looking after your brand and that ultimately it's something that people aspire to, and I think that we do that really well at Triumph. And then I think it's about understanding what makes the difference between a good bike and a great bike, and having that extra bit of refinement or quality or character in your motorcycles that differentiates you from the mainstream. And I think it's going to continue to make that increasingly important, so that people have got a reason to want something different. So for sure, it's something that we're all going to have to learn to live with and evolve. But I think there's as many positives to it as there are challenges in terms of the competitive piece.
Moving into racing, actually, 2025 sees what I think is the 7th year of you being the sole engine supplier for the Moto2 World Championship. How does that relationship between racing and road bikes work for you in terms of a sort of longer term strategy?
Yeah, so I think that was talking about pleasant surprises at Triumph over the years. That was probably another one when we decided to go and do that. But I think it's been hugely successful for us, and it's a fantastic way for us to showcase our engineering credentials, develop an engine platform within the top top flight of racing, and take all the learnings that you can from that, and then feed those through into your road bikes. And obviously, we do that quite specifically with the 765 engine that powers the Street Triple, but that also then bleeds through into other areas as well. So it's just a great way to learn and evolve, and then apply that learning into your road bike.
It's good branding exercise, I suppose, as well, marketing.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's obviously another clear benefit. It gets the Triumph brand in front of lots of eyes without necessarily having to go and run a team in whichever it would be, Moto2 or one of the other World Series, which, as we know, are hugely expensive places to be.
Cool. I've got some questions from our Bike Club members. Yeah. So we have our own sort of social media site called Bike Club, which is essentially a sort of a community forum base, but you can come and join up for free. Anyway, so we asked them, or we mentioned to them that you were bringing you in. So I've got some questions. So 4, in fact. Dan asks, what do closing showrooms mean for the future of motorcycling in the UK? I don't know if it's specific to Triumph.
Well, hopefully not too much. I mean, I think we have to sort of separate between motorcycling in the UK and the wider world at the moment, and some of the things that are going on within the economy and the challenges that's creating for business, and that's much bigger than motorcycles. And I think we would all recognise that there have been some casualties in the motorcycle dealer networks, and ours has not been immune. But I'm really pleased to say that we're in the process of putting new dealers back on the map in a number of locations. We've reopened on the west of Birmingham. We've reopened in Chester very recently. We've got plans afoot to reopen in Nottingham and Plymouth. So for me, that's a real positive, because it's a vote of confidence from business owners in the strength of the Triumph brand and business opportunity that we can secure that investment. So I know it's been a little bit of a tough time, but I think we are coming out the other side of that now, and that we're in good health for the future.
Good news. Luke asks, are there any other manufacturers' models on the market right now that you admire? Now, I don't know whether this is with your professional hat on or your personal hat on. Or
Professionally, I think it's hard to look past the things that do well commercially. So I would look at the GS platform for BMW in particular as just a standout performer over the years, and I admire them hugely for their success with that bike, and it's one that we've been trying to get to grips with many years. So that would be an obvious one. I think Honda have done well in the last 12 months with some of their new bikes as well. The Honda CB 750 Hornet was good, and the 1000 Hornet looks equally like a lot of bike for the money. So those are a couple of standouts, but I'm staunchly Triumph, as you would imagine.
Of course. Yes, I'd like to have been a fly on the wall in all of those manufacturers' boardrooms when Honda announced the pricing of their Hornet 750 on 1000, because it must have been whatever.
Yeah, I still think they've made a mistake.
Introductory prices only. Yeah. Grant asks, what made you decide to start building motocross and enduro bikes? So I think we've probably covered that, haven't we?
Yeah.
Earlier on. All right, we'll move on. Number 4, David says, will the Tiger Sport get a 1200 engine in the future? And do you see sports tourists taking over from adventure bikes?
Well, I'm going to have to wheel out the industry standard that I can't talk about future product development plans. I think I can say I'd love it if we did, but please don't take from that means that we will. But I think we can all see that there would be some potential there. Sports tourers, adventure tourers, I think the pendulum swings back and forwards a little bit. I know I talk to a lot of customers that like the adventure touring riding position, but are very clear that they have no intention of going off-road. So having something that's a little bit more road focused and road friendly appeals for them, and I think we're filling that little bit of the gap in the market now, alongside the people that want the all capability kind of adventure tour.
So if anyone hears late night hammering from the Hinckley workshop at 7 o'clock on a Friday, that's you trying to get up 1200 engine in a Tiger Sport 800 frame.
Yeah.
Dev's project room, it'll say.
Don't tell anyone.
It is interesting though, isn't it? Because we did our sports tour group test a couple of months ago. And the 3 bikes that were in that, the NT 1100, the GS6000 GT and the
Ninja 1100.
and the Ninja 1100. 3 very different bikes within, you know, so sports tourer is a very broad term anyway, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's evolved a long way, hasn't it, from what it used to be in the Sprint ST era, where it was more sort of fully fared. I think it's gradually stood up a little bit, hasn't it? But dynamically, the bikes are now a lot closer to the sporting end.
And interestingly, as many of the sports tourers are now based on adventure bikes that have been made more road friendly than sports bikes that have been made more touring friendly.
Wonderful. Dave, we've got to cut it short. Thank you. I'm sure we could have sat here for another 2 hours and chatted more about all sorts of motorcycling stuff, as well as Triumph stuff, of course. But thanks for coming in. Thanks for giving me your time, and it's been a fascinating insight.
No, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Good. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've got a lot from it. Don't forget to come and find us at Facebook, on our Facebook group. Become a BikeSocial member, and of course, get your insurance from Bennetts. Until the next episode of Talking Heads. See ya.